All right, we're live. Johnny, you did it.
First time every time.
Amazing. Um, well, you wouldn't be familiar with this, but after we used to have a producer, and she like our intros were beautiful and seamless, and like there was music and all this other stuff because like she handled all that. And then when we didn't have a producer anymore, we had to start doing it ourselves. And so this has been a history of being very bad at getting our intros correct. And so,
Nice. Well, good way to start off the new year.
right,
Yeah.
it's flawless. Thank you, Johnny. Right. Hello, GitOpsians. Welcome back to GitOps Guide to the Galaxy 2024. For those of you with a short memory like me, just to catch you up, what we have been doing the last several weeks of months, really, actually, of GitOps Guide is taking a little bit of a step back from GitOps and looking more holistically about like how software is built and delivered. So we kind of have been doing a bit of a CI suite of things and learning about how different types of like software, we did operating systems, we did like server-side compiled software, stuff like that, like how all of that undergoes like its like build and delivery process, right? And so the thing I wanted the most was video games. I found somebody. So that brings us to our guest Walter. But before we go to that, I just forgot because I have the memory of, I don't know, something with a really short memory.
Goldfish.
I think goldfishes have great memories, though. I don't know. Gnats, maybe? Something that only lives 24 hours. That's my memory. So before we go to that, quick announcements. First of all, KubeCon in Paris, I think they're starting to release the CFP acceptances. And, so people, if you've submitted a CFP, you should start hearing things from the co-located events. If you haven't already, those are coming through. And I think the main conference comes up in a few weeks as well. So I will be there. I will be there in my capacity as a member of the Kubernetes Code of Conduct Committee as well. So, of course, you can always find me if there's anything shouldn't happen. But if it does, anything comes up. And I'll be there in my capacity as, I think, as a speaker. Like right now, I'm on a talk. I'm intending to actually do that talk. But, I don't know. Anything could happen. It's still March. But I will be at the actual convention. You will find me there.
Doing random interviews, that kind of stuff, just like walking up escalators and getting pulled
walking up escalators and having the GitLab people come and ask me questions. Yeah, that was great. Yeah. I don't know where that footage is. I would really love, if anybody knows where that footage is, please send it to me. I would love to see how they edited it. Because apparently my answer was too long and nuanced, and they made me give it to in like 30 seconds or less. And I was like, okay, thanks, friends. But yeah, those are the announcements, I think. Johnny, did I forget an announcement?
I don't think so. Like there's, it's coming back from the break, so it's pretty quiet for now. But I think that coming up in the next month or so, we're going to start seeing a lot of things. I think like OpenShift 4.15, those things are going to start to release. So the products along with that are going to start to release. So we'll have some more announcements along that.
Yes, exactly. So I think that just takes us straight into today's topic, which is like building game clients and servers, Tekton, DevOps, all those fun things. Walt kindly volunteered, a complete stranger on the internet, to come teach us these things. And that's why I love the internet. And yeah, well, I'm going to hand it over to you. Introduce yourself, and then this is your show now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, first and foremost. Super stoked to be here. Just a little about me, a little background. I came from aerospace and DoD. The place where you always find Tekton is in the DoD, mostly because you can't use GitHub Actions, you can't use GitLab CI, you can't use all your favorite plug-and-play varieties. And most notably, I had a big stint with Kraken to build out their CI/CD implementation for like a bunch of, Ethereum and blockchain nodes, which also needs pretty good CI/CD to get that going. And so you're like, hey, what's going on with game dev? Well, I'm currently working with a big Web3 brand, and we've moved to Tekton for all of our build systems. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So that's me in a nutshell. Also find me on LinkedIn if you want to talk about this afterwards. Happy to communicate. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slide deck if that's cool.
Yeah, I'll enable it as soon as it shows up in my
awesome.
bar.
And here's Walt's information, since I was not on the ball here and did not show his information as he was talking. So I'm over
Johnny,
here. Johnny,
not on the spot.
I'm not on the spot right now.
Awesome. Cool. And you guys can see this okay? Looks good?
I think a little bigger.
A little bigger?
Yeah.
Let's see. Does this look good? Are we there? Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's the correct level of zoom. I'll let Waleed tell us. He always tells us.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to start off just with like a big high level for anybody who's not familiar with like what Tekton is. Tekton is a automation framework that's currently, CNCF, all that good stuff. There's currently a test coming out, shameless plug. I had helped make that with the Linux Foundation. So if you're looking to get certified in Tekton, you can do that. I make that test. It's pretty great. And so basically, for anybody that's not familiar, or has used GitHub Actions, I'm going to relate it to that because it's the most accessible, like GitHub, action interface on the planet. Basically, we take like pipeline components and we break them down into like little tasks, the same way you would with like a GitHub action with your steps, and you can use that to perform automated tasks, right? So that's like Tekton at a high level. And you're going to say, well, Walter, why the heck would I care about this for like game development? Like we have Jenkins, we have all these like cool tools that already work. And the primary reason for that, I'm just going to kind of get a little dorky. We're going to get a little dorky up front here, is so that we can actually have like an event-driven model for determining when like producers can push their changes, right? So I'm trying to coin the phrase of being like the Walt Disney of DevOps, right? So like for me, my primary goal is like the platform guy is to make sure that the experience for the guy who makes the trees or who updates the internal service code or anything like that, when they push their code to Perforce, like it's all automated and good to go, and they get their test cases, and Tekton kind of takes care of that, right? And so about a year ago, maybe a year and a half, there was this event listener model that was like adopted widely by the community that allows you to basically forward an Nginx like listener, same way you would send GitHub hooks, right? And from that, you can basically take JSON and like perform endless numbers of actions with them in the cluster, right? Which is like how we do all of this game dev stuff. I'll stop here for a question for a second if you guys have any questions.
I'm just curious, like as the Walt Disney of I can't remember what you said already, but like
DevOps.
being the Walt of DevOps, how's that gone so far? Like, has that been adopted, or is that like, are you still working on it? You got some challenges with the team?
So like there's always challenges, right, and trade-offs in tech, right? And for the most part, yeah, everybody's on board, right? And I'll say at the last place I was in, like the system was so good we could do 10,000 pipelines per day, and no one was the wiser, right? Which is like a really big number of pipelines. And so people are for it, right? Like the primary thing when you're moving from like, oh, I have a legacy system that has all these core features, like Jenkins, for example. It's usually Jenkins. And they're like, oh, I need it to be able to like build my different branches, or we call them depots, right? I need it to be able to do all of these cool things that it already does. I need it to push to S3. I need it to do endless numbers of things, right? The goal is like always, okay, well, how do we get feature parity so that when we like cut the lights off on Jenkins, like nobody is the wiser, right? And then from there, nobody really cares. It's kind of like the whole like, hey, it's in Kubernetes, but like to normal people, that doesn't really matter. It's like you still get your service at the end of the day, right? And that's the big thing. So I would say it's going really well. A lot of support, a lot of adoption. And I think the primary reason for the adoption is the complexities of automating Windows clients, which is like one of the big problems in the space right now. And I'll kind of like jump into that. That's which is actually our next topic, unless there's more questions.
I think there was just some question about what the there we go. So what's the status now parity wise between Jenkins and Tekton? And then I think there was a desire to like, if you could zoom in a little bit more on some of the
Yeah, we can do that here. So like basically the feature parities, we're like 80% of the way there. Like I can build all of the pipelines. We can do the S3 builds and or S3 copies and what have you, so that developers can get their code out. I think the last bit, which is more of like a feature enhancement, which is really cool. It's like the automatic rollout with like GitOps for servers, right? So like the big thing right here, and we're going to like skip ahead a little bit so I can kind of give you the meat and potatoes of what's going on. So what Tekton ends up handling is like the building, the packaging, and the shipping of like the servers and the clients, right? And so right now what ends up happening with a lot of big industry places is they have like auto scaling groups that like roll out the new image, right? For like handling an EC2 instance that has the latest and greatest game server, or they're like copying in the latest binary and like restarting the server and configuring that. So what we're doing right now is more around like, we have Kubernetes hosting these Linux servers, right? And then when Tekton finishes building them, Argo CD rolls out the latest container, right? And so that gives you like, basically we went from building like twice a day to being able to build a couple dozen times a day, which is like a lot more iteration than you'd normally get in like a game cycle loop.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Any other questions I'm missing out here? What's the status? Yeah, cool. Awesome. Great.
Yeah, you're good. Move on.
Cool. Awesome.
I'll harass you. Don't worry.
No problem. I'm just double checking. So I did want to go into Unreal just a little bit because this is kind of the like big kicker here. For those of you who don't know what this is like one of the big three game engines. Big difference is like C++ and everything's compiled. And so when you think about Unreal, what I like to think about it, because I come traditionally from DevOps and I've kind of pivoted into game engineering, is like Unreal gives you a way to run like a really nice, clean make on all of your C++ and compile it down into binaries. And we end up using this internal tool that is like open source in Unreal called the Unreal Automation Tool, which is what you use to perform all your builds, your cooks, and your runs, right? So just think about like building being like your make, where you would like compile all of your code, or all of your code, your build being the like, okay, I have this compiled code, but I'm compiling for Windows. So I need to make sure everything's optimized for the Windows DLLs, et cetera, et cetera. Same for Mac, same for Linux. And then the cook being the like, am I an authoritative server or am I a client? And how do I define the constraints around which piece of the puzzle? Like if I'm a client, can I connect to the server? Yes or no? And you usually do that with like release tagging and things like that. So that's kind of like the complexity of Unreal in a nutshell on how we go about building these things. Awesome.
I think it was one of the previous episodes I was told that Unreal Engine is why video games make me motion sick now if they're first person.
They do have like the automated motion blur, which can be a bit frustrating if like you just leave it on the whole time.
Yeah,
that's definitely a problem.
I have no idea if this game was made with Unreal, but there's the game Stray where you are the cat.
Sure.
It is a great game. It is beautiful, great storytelling. I can play it for 30-minute intervals before I start getting so nauseated I will have to stop. I no idea why I'm so sensitive to it. And that is just completely unrelated to anything. But if anybody knows how to fine-tune those settings so that I can play my video game, please send me instructions. Because I've been trying to like turn down like the brilliance of the graphics in hopes of helping, and it's still not really working.
Well, I hope you get that resolved because like that's no fun.
It's so sad. Okay, we can move on.
Awesome. So there's this really fun thing that we talk about a lot. We use it in normal DevOps too. It's the client server model, right? And so with Unreal, you can produce servers that are of your favorite variety of like compilation. And so for us, we use like Linux, right? And the joy of that is it's way easier to build. You can just use your regular like Ubuntu box or Red Hat box or whatever you're into, and just use CMake to go grab all the things you need and be good to go. So that's super helpful for like compiling and building servers. Super, yeah, authoritative servers, awesome. Super helpful. And so like the other piece of that is like most gamers are on Windows computers, right? And so like the biggest complexity here is how do you compartmentalize Windows into a container that is first small enough to fit inside Kubernetes because they're pretty large, and second that you can iterate on in a way that like actually makes sense, right? And so that is like one of the cool technical hurdles there for dealing with the client server model.
Johnny, don't we have Windows containers?
There are some, yeah. I think they're mostly like .NET and
yeah. And so like figuring out the like Windows container model makes it much easier to like build in Tekton, which is like the big hurdle in the space right now. Normally, the way it ends up working is like there's a Jenkins host that's like provisioned on somebody's like big beefy Windows computer, and like people just send like build requests to it. Because like that's what you have to do, because like the DLLs are so the tree of DLLs that you need to like actually compile Windows with Unreal is obscene. And so there's this like open source library called Unreal 4 Docker.
Mm-hmm.
And it normally supports Unreal 4, but through some hackiness, you can actually tell it to go look at Unreal 5 source code instead, and it will compile for your platform. And then the rest is just regular Kubernetes, which is super helpful.
Hey, well, have you guys looked at like KubeVirt or anything like that to spin up the
it's way too expensive. Way too expensive, right? So like the KubeVirt's great for like enterprise scale where you're you need a host like a virtual machine or what have you, and you already have the bare metal, right? And you're just scheduling it like in real time, and you're using whatever's in excess to run like other pipelines or to host other hosts or to do other things. But you really have to go into like capacity planning and understanding like, okay, if I'm spending $30,000 a week on this like bare metal node.
Yeah.
Am I actually getting that much value out of it? So it's really not worth it for like, young game studios that are like trying to find product market fit. And so this model is way cheaper, right? So like the big thing right now is that AWS, EKS, their latest and greatest Kubernetes version supports Windows AMIs. And so you can just actually add Windows AMIs as part of the fleet in Kubernetes. Nice. And so you don't have to worry about the complexity anymore. And so all you have to worry about is like making sure that your Windows host is the same, like LTS, like LTS 2022 is what we're using nowadays. It's the same for the container as it is for the host. And so when you spawn the build for the client, or rather to build the container that will build the client, the Unreal 4 -Docker like Python library checks the host to see what all the dependencies are for that version, and basically just copies them into the container so that you don't have to worry about that when you push your build.
Awesome.
And so that was like one of the big technical hurdles that we didn't have in the past, because before you'd have to go and build your own, your cluster API and your container D, and you'd have to package your own AMIs and like push those to AWS, and then like you can't use the EKS scheduler anymore because it wants to own everything, right? So you have to use a custom thing, right? And so it makes it very cumbersome to like, basically by being able to use this, we were able to like fast track our dev by at least 6 months, because I would have had to go grow our own EKS to make this work.
I love getting out of the business of doing bespoke things to solve common problems.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked at how little data there is out on the internet about how to containerize Unreal and build with it. So this was a really awesome learning experience. So yeah, if you're interested in this, take a look at the latest and greatest Kubernetes for EKS, and you can just add Windows nodes. They just run on AMIs. You just pay for the extra Windows license. So it ends up being about like 40 cents more per hour or something like that, but it's very doable.
So we have a question. So would it be possible to for cross-platform servers? So I have a server from my current pet project, which I run on Linux, but my game can run on Mac, Windows, or Linux. Yeah, this is a great question. So like one of the big things that I'm working on right now is like so like with Tekton, the pipelines are almost identical, right? Like the way that, and then we'll kind of move to this here because this is important. So just like you would do a make anywhere else, like you're using your Unreal build, you're doing your whatever you're doing, right? Like for us, we're using Perforce, which is centralized source. And so long as the source is the same, right? So what we end up doing, sorry, I'm going to jump around a little bit because this is important for the conversation. What we end up doing is we use GP3 like AWS storage, right? And we like mount workspaces. So yes, you can, right? So with Tekton, you would just like tell it the annotation for like a Linux host and have it hop on the Linux host and run the build with Perforce and do like the Unreal, build, cook, run. And then if you wanted to do it with Windows, you would do the exact same thing, build, cook, run on a Windows host, right? So you're just like remounting the partition and then recompiling all of the pieces. Does that answer your question, Hunter? Well, while we let Hunter confirm or deny, Johnny, you got a question.
It looks like it's
our favorite person.
I know. I think he's for OpenShift using Windows nodes. I'm not sure what he's asking here.
I think he's making fun of you.
Oh, okay. Yes, well, that worked because I'm like, I don't do Windows, man.
My shirt says not your sysadmin, but it probably should say not your Windows admin. And yes, Hunter confirms that we are
cool.
Solid in that.
Yeah, so the code base ends up being the same, which is great. The only like complexity that's kind of like would be nice to have is like the Mac Tekton runners. But like for that, it's kind of like a big cumbersome thing. You end up using the same model here, but to actually, you got to like lease Macs from someone who will lease them to you. And then just run Docker with the port exposed, and the same model applies. The same build, cook, run applies. Everything is the same. You just can't manage it with Kubernetes. Or excuse me, you can't manage it with external Kubernetes. You can manage it with Kubernetes, just not EKS.
That makes a lot of sense. I haven't had to build anything. I used to work where we had mobile development and not games, but we had to build apps for iPhones and so forth, right? Sure. And so creating automated CI/CD systems with test flight, that was like a whole fun, exciting thing for the iPhones, especially because the CI/CD systems could only run on Windows on a OS X machine. And they didn't have like server mode where it would never sleep.
Right.
So I had a little job that just kept the machine awake so that it wouldn't go to sleep. Just a little David in the background, just keeping the thing awake so that the pipelines would always be available. I think that stuff has come a long way since then.
Yeah, it's definitely way nicer in AWS now. Way nicer. I see a question here about being able to do this with OpenShift. I think the answer is absolutely yes, right? Tekton doesn't really care. Tekton doesn't care, right? You give it the annotation for the node that you'd like for it to spawn a job on, and it will spawn the job. I think the bigger complexity is around like the networking aspect of how Windows supports IPAM, and getting that to work out of the box is very cumbersome because it's not like Amazon's like, hey, this feature is broken. Go figure it out. Here's how you fix it. And so like figuring out how to get IPAM to work with like your kubeDNS and stuff like that, like that's like the biggest technical hurdle because Windows nodes won't give IPv4 addresses if IPAM's not enabled. And so you'll never get runtime.
Yeah, and Windows on OpenShift does support it. I've literally never used it. Like it's one of those things where I've always had it on my list of like, man, if I had enough free time to just look into it, that's something I would look into, but I've just never actually dug into it. And then the other thing too is like the way that you were talking about using the workspaces within Tekton, right? Like that's 100% like that's what we do today with OpenShift. Well, with Tekton is we use the workspaces to go from build to build or whatever and just reuse the data.
So this is a little different, right? So like something to keep in mind here, like when we do normal workflows, we do like, we have like a git clone step and it goes and it grabs the source code and like you can like run that operation each and every time, right? But game builds are really, really big and baked assets are massive, right? So like uncooked, we're looking at like 10 terabytes of data, and cooked, we're looking at like maybe 500 gigs for like a small game. And so like the data at scale becomes a really interesting complexity that you normally don't get in traditional software development. And so the way that we end up dealing with that is we have like multiple PVCs that are just like ginormous Perforce workspaces that Tekton can like hop between to build things.
Yeah, it's the same way we do it in pipelines. Right? You just say, hey, this workspace basically maps down to this PVC if you want it to be that way, and then you just mount that PVC in.
Mount the PVC, good to go.
Yep. So that's awesome. This is I didn't even know EKS could do that, to be honest. And then like with the Windows support, so I'm
hoping to get an article out soon because somebody's talking about this. I'm like, this is really cool stuff. Like, why aren't people doing this?
I think it's one of those things of just sometimes when you're on the bleeding edge, even though there's still a lot of people using the things, it's like, what is the, and
the sunk cost price to pivot, right? Like if you've got a Jenkins or a GitHub action runner that works, it's like, well, what's the cost of figuring this out? Well, you need somebody who's a Kubernetes expert and a Tekton expert and a game dev expert and all of these things. And normally those worlds don't blur together very often.
Yeah, no, it's what is that? That's like platform engineering plus SRE plus QE plus DevOps, like
and then like a game like C++.
See, I don't even. Oh, this is literally exactly why I wanted someone who come on and talk about game dev stuff, though, right? I know I'm Jon Snow. I don't know anything about game dev. I've never worked in the gaming space. I'm like, I play video games. I should get to learn about this. So appreciate you coming on. I think I don't know where we are on our topic anymore. I forgot. I got distracted by the Windows containers on OpenShift conversation on the side.
No, it's definitely doable. Yeah, that's like a really cool use case, right? Like the whole like, okay, well, if I can get AMI, no matter what the Kubernetes OS is or host, you can do this, right? Because Tekton has native support for PowerShell, which is how you normally like enter the container and do all of your things. And so like just for like, this is just a note for the nerds that'll be here in the future. If you use the Unreal 4 build tool, and I'll like find a way to get you guys this link, it ends up being with like all of your dependencies plus chocolate and all of the like yummy things you need to like have extras and use AWS CLI to push stuff at 5.87 gigs, which is small enough to run on most hosts.
Yeah. I was gonna say there's Johnny literally just put it like he popped up the private chat. Copy paste any links there throughout this, and we'll throw them into the official like host commenting.
Perfect. I'll send that right now. Let's do that. Perfect. This guy right here, Python 4, Unreal 4 Python pip. Awesome.
Sorry, this comment. Waleed, we've missed you. We haven't seen you in a while. This is why we've missed you. Yes, we should start grading like levels of difficulties in terms of things we show on GitOps. That would be kind of fun. Now accepting CFPs open for how to create a grading system.
Yikes.
Let's see I love this concept. Let's see what people come up with.
Yeah, this one is definitely fun. Cool. So I do have like one high level thing, and then we can go into like the meat and potatoes of like the CI/CD delivery with GitOps at scale, right? So we are using Amazon for all of these goodies, right? And so like the way the workflow works is very similar to what you would see with any other workflow after the game is built. The game build is like the most complicated piece, and everything else is just your favorite variety of GitOps. So we end up using like Argo CD or Flux, plus all of your Grafana, Loki, monitoring and metrics and things like that. And then everything enters like this, right? So we have everything comes in through Git, through webhooks, right? Or from the pull method from Argo CD. And then Tekton does the builds with Perforce syncs periodically to get the latest and greatest code, pushes that out. So we're using all sorts of wonderful tools like Kybarno and autoscalers and stuff like that you'd normally use in a regular like cloud native platform.
Yeah, from here it starts looking like anything else, more or less. Any
other delivery, yeah.
Which is awesome. Cool. I think that's so neat. I have a completely unrelated question, which is like, where do you build the skill of creating pretty slides? Because this is like not a skill I have. I recently Red Hat has a regional event that we do. It used to be called SKO. Now it's called Red Hat One. So I was asked to be a speaker at this regional event. And I had to create the slides with a team of people, not by myself, but with a team of people that all of the regions are presenting. But because I was like the first identified speaker, I ended up writing the whole first draft.
Nice.
And then other people came in and were like, "Oh, we need to make these pretty." And I was like, "Have fun. Good luck."
The content's here.
The content's here. That's where I end. So I always am curious for people who have pretty slides. Like, what is your strategy to pretty slides?
So like my big thing is that I talk about Tekton all the time and I'm obsessed, and I have like a database full of like things that I need for like when I talk about Tekton. And then this is just like Excalidraw, and they have like a new slide feature. I picked this up, somewhere in VMware when everybody was like hot on the Excalidraw train, and I just never left.
Yeah, Excalidraw is awesome.
Really easy for like dealing with this kind of stuff.
I had Excalidraw working on my machine, and then there was like almost a year period of time where actually Google Chrome wouldn't work on my machine. It would work for most things, but anything actually Google related, it couldn't open. So like it wouldn't open Gmail, it wouldn't open Gmeet, it wouldn't open slides. Like all of the actual Google stuff was completely broken on it. And at that same time, my Excalidraw for Fedora also went kaput. Now it's working again, and I haven't retried Excalidraw. I've been using Draw.io for a while. But if I'm honest with you, I just put up like 2 or 3 bullets on a slide and then say whatever I'm going to say. The last time I gave a presentation at KubeCon Amsterdam, I didn't even remember what was on my slides. I was like, I don't know. There's something here. I don't really care. Here's a drawing because I'm trying to practice these. I've become that person. And I'm so sorry for everybody who attends my talks because I don't take myself very seriously anymore. And so my slides reflect that.
Yeah, this is the first time anyone's ever made a comment about my slides, and so I'll take it. You know what I mean? I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be the guy. I'm like watching a couple of your shows, and like everybody's just like going through Chrome tabs and showing cool stuff, and I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna be that like put together guy who's like. So thank you, I appreciate that.
At this point, you're lucky to get a slide from me. I don't. I'm the complete opposite. Like, do we need slides? Is slides a thing? I think we can skip them, right? I did give an entire. There's a DEI community that I have through Red Hat that they sponsor with a nonprofit, and I kind of founded the community. It's called WITY, so Women in Tech, Women in Software Engineering, and so we give technical webinars roughly once a month, right?
Sure.
I gave an entire one on continuous integration, no slides.
Nice.
I was like, I'm not sorry, you get no slides, you get a brain dump. That's what you get. It was actually fine, but yeah, it's one of those things where I'm like, I should try to get good at slides. I like yours because they're simple and informative, and they have just the right amount of things Some people make like really like, so like some graphic designer came into their slides, and I really appreciate that, but it's also overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, no, I just wanted a guide, you know, like this stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This is
I do it
thoughtful,
every
right?
day. This is what I, you know, it's my favorite thing. I love this stuff. So I just wanted to make sure I got you the important stuff out here so that when people come back to this and they're like, oh man, I heard from this crazy guy that there's a way to actually build Unreal Windows clients in Kubernetes. I want to know how to do that.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty neat. Okay, we've completely derailed you, talked about completely unrelated things. That's
no,
how
this
stream
is
works.
fine. This is fine. We've got a lot of the good ones. I did want to talk about one of the big differences in complexity between like normal Tekton pipelines and game development, and that is like Perforce. And Perforce is, for anybody who's unaware, is a centralized source control option instead of like decentralized like GitHub. And so there's like a different paradigm shift from like branches to like depots, and from, you know, like these things we call work streams, which are pretty much like Perforce branches. And so like in the world of game development, there is this like concept of producers, people that aren't like technical people, but that have these like awesome skills to like, you know, paint and draw and come up with stories and do all the like really important stuff to actually like build a brand, build IP, build the experience. And those objects tend to be like very, very, very large. Right. And so that's kind of where this like work stream flow comes in. And so like a developer can check out a depot, and I kind of think of depot like Home Depot, right? Where it's like you have all these things that are in the shelf, and anybody can like pick up a version of Home Depot and put it somewhere else. And like, okay, that's our staging release. We're going to call it Staging Home Depot. And it's got all the staging stuff in it. So you can like pull and push things from staging. And so this was like the biggest technical hurdle for me before getting all of the Windows stuff to work, is just there is no cloud native integration with Perforce and Swarm, which is what we use for like code review. And like the hooks and the integrations and things like that to actually get Tekton to like do actions based off of Perforce, like updating state, if that makes sense. And so just like for technical hurdles and things like that, like this is important to know going into your, hey, let's move to Kubernetes to build out all our cool stuff.
Yeah, I think they use Perforce in RHEL. I'm trying. I should know this better because one of my co-founders for that DEI community, she is in the RHEL team, and she talks about this all the time. And they do kind of some of the same things. So when like she works on storage devices for RHEL, and so like when they need to validate some stuff, there's a way to like request a container, and it kind of has, I think, some of that same like Perforce challenges. So I think the workflow is similar on like in this case between building an operating system or building an extension of an operating system and building the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Perforce usually ends up becoming like a beloved cat, right, or an animal, like not cattle, right? And it usually lives somewhere in someone's like AWS account, and you have licenses and all that cool stuff. So that's like on my hit list to move this into Kubernetes and like make it more cloud available. Although the storage is like really, really nuts. Like for a lot of the Windows stuff, like you're stuck with GP3. There's no EFS. There's no random stuff that like you would normally be like, oh, it's a Windows node. Of course I can mount this, like network file system. No, you can't. Not in Kubernetes. Nope. It doesn't exist. And so that makes like availability zones really interesting, because you have to keep all your storage in the same AZ, which like exposes you to outages more so than like you would in like a normal Kubernetes environment. And so just like lessons learned, like I've fallen on those swords so you don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is like in game development, right, where you're not really dealing with, you probably don't have any like consumer data. So that multi-AZ thing is an option. This is such a problem when we're sitting here, like in the space that I'm in, where we have to be within regional boundaries, because with what we do, we have to be compliant with data governance laws, right?
Sure.
Like, so data in like Australia cannot leave hardware in Australia, like all of that other stuff. I think with online games, that could be a problem you really experience when like your players are online. I don't know, kind of.
So like for the servers themselves, right? Like once the game is built and compiled, like you can use a Gonus or anything like that to like host your quote unquote fleet across like your availability zones. Like that's no problem. But like when you're building, right? So like Kubernetes by default and EKS will just spawn you new nodes based off of like where it has IP space in the VPC, right? Doesn't really care what AZ it's in because it can do what it needs to do to like configure its CNI drivers. But Windows cares. And so like if you spawn, like you have 3 AZs in a region, if you spawn a Windows node in C, but like the old Windows node spawned in A and like mounted the GP3 storage and like spawned all the Perforce goodies in like A, and then the new node tries to mount it, you can't, right? So you end up in this situation where you have to manage all of this data and the complexity of like dealing with that.
Good times.
Super fun. Cool. So like those are my like really big hit list items. I'll turn it back over to you guys for questions on where you'd like to like dive in a little deeper, or anything you'd like to throw at me about any of this stuff. I'm happy to answer.
You said something earlier that didn't get into it, and then it's kind of unrelated, but I'm also super nosy. You mentioned like Tekton for like Ethereum. And that's a thing? Question mark?
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a thing, right? So like the big thing, and sorry, this gets into blockchains, right? So like validators, right? Something needs to like do the packaging and the building for a validator, right? Custom validators for custom providers, just like you would custom build any of your whatevers, right? And so, finance is kind of secure. And so you need a way to build out all of these blockchains without exposing the builds to shared compute, right? So like if you use GitHub runners or insert your favorite variety of like Circle CI or whatever, you don't get your own dedicated hosts. And so you can't 100% guarantee that memory isn't being read somewhere and something nefarious isn't happening. The biggest phrase in crypto, not your keys, not your crypto, right? And so like dealing with the complexities of how do you build nodes securely? How do you get those into ECR so you can register them appropriately and like move them across the world to be compliant with those data laws you were talking about, get them spun up? How do you allocate funds to that? How do you take venture capital? How do you do all these things? Tekton had a pretty heavy hand in making all that happen.
Today I learned.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. It gets into some really cool stuff. Like, so the biggest thing there, and this goes into like more security than anything, is like the SLSA compliance, right? Like getting to being able to have your supply chain secured and have your binary authorization and stuff like that. That is like paramount when you're dealing with like finance. And Tekton gives that to you at least at like level 2.5, without any like post provisioning. And you combine that with like ChainGuard and maybe like a Loki database, and you can like start integrating that with Vault to do like one-shot GPG signatures with like a one of these keys, right? To like do things that you normally wouldn't be able to do just with like regular runners. So you can start using it for like what I would consider to be sensitive transactions. Yeah.
This is that secure supply chain thing. I forget what is all public on all this stuff. Darn it. We do a lot of that stuff here. Like at Red Hat, like specifically on OpenShift, specifically on our like images that we create. So like if and I think you can run a Red Hat image on base Kubernetes, right? So we have our image registry, and it has, we have our security opinions, right? We remove root users and stuff like that from the images. And then all of that, so like the SBOMs and the secure supply chain and the signed, all that other stuff, we do all of that. And that goes into our images, which was part of the topic I actually talked about in Amsterdam, actually, was like, hey, secure supply chain stuff, like shift that left, throw that onto providers. So I think most of the like people who are Red Hat users who are on the comments channel here, wow, that was a great hand gesture to explain nothing. Like they are those folks to be familiar with what I'm talking about, right? Because they use it all the time. But yeah, I use the Red Hat images if I'm doing like just stuff unkind too, simply because I already have keys to Quay.
Well, and if you're using the UBI stuff, right, it makes sense to use the UBI images, right? Because it's the universal base image, right? It gives you a vanilla RPM based image that you can reuse, right? It can be rel based, right? It's got the Python libraries in it if you want secure Python. And it's not just images that we build that are under that sign framework and stuff like that. It's everything. All of our RPMs are like that. Like that, we've got that provenance. I don't know if that's the right word. Like going all the way back to like everything gets pulled in, and that's what we're doing, right? We've got that SBOM goes all the way back to like where we pulled it from upstream, and we've started to refactor it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you like couple that magic of like, okay, cool. Like I know this was signed. I can see it in the public ledger, which is so interesting to me. Like to see the cryptography of like having a ledger and like the Web3 world like merging together. And it's like, oh, the security frontier is in Web3. And it's like that is really interesting to see. And you couple that with like identity, right? So like it's interesting to see how you can like cross-pollinate teams and have them be asynchronous without needing like a lot of like legal entities and bodies to secure their work, when you can like write provenances code and then like authorize identities to be able to perform transactions. It's really interesting. It takes a lot of the burden off of like compliance and puts it back into the power of the like business.
So I have a question going back to the Tekton pipeline, something
Sure.
You mentioned something like being able to run something like 10,000 pipelines or what have you. It was a high number.
Really big number.
So obviously you're doing some automatic pruning of past jobs.
Yeah, 100%. That's like
base.
Yeah.
So I was curious with was like, what did you find, like, what do you keep around? Like, do you keep any artifacts around from those past jobs? Do you push them like results back to Git or anything? Or like, I don't care, the job finished, it's completely dead.
No, it's done, right? The reality of the world gets pushed as that OCI image to your artifact hub of your favorite variety. And like in that type of world, like Tekton is on a receiver model, right? Always. And like Flux and Kyvarno handle like the state of reality.
Okay.
Right? That way you can like dictate what is like, you know, you need policies for everything. You need to know where the keys are coming from. You need keys in all shapes and varieties, right? And so in that world, it's really important to make sure that like Tekton is stateless for everything that it needs, like except for exactly what it needs to know to do a thing, right? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so what about like failed jobs, right? Successful jobs, I could see a case for. I don't really care about keeping that around. We know the job worked, whatever. But what about failed jobs?
Yeah, so like failed jobs are really interesting, and it depends, right? And when I say depends, it's like so like in game dev, like the security is a little different. Like you can send Slack updates and do things like that, but in like fintech world, it's a little different. Like you can't see production. It's like DoD style, right? And so the way you see the world is a little different. And so like keeping failed jobs is great, especially in the secure world, because you kind of need to go gather those artifacts. Or like if they're like for example, I had them pumped out to like Grafana and and Loki and stuff like that, so you kind of see what was going on in the world. But that's kind of like the joy of Flux, is that like you can like force any cluster to look like any other cluster. And so like if you are using EKS, you can spawn a like dev environment that's an identical clone to like production. It makes it really easy to like see what's wrong in a world where you can't see what's going on.
Got it. Go ahead. I was just gonna post Wally's question, but you go first.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I want to answer that Flux one in a second because I'm a Flux fanboy. But you first.
All right. Yeah. So like, who has access? Does anybody have access to like your Tekton or UI, or like even like?
No, there is no Tekton UI.
Namespace?
There's like a vulnerability. Okay. So like in dev, yes, you can see it. It's in read only, right? Absolutely. In production, there's they had a security audit on Tekton, and the only security flaw currently is with the dashboard and the way that it's configured, where you can like overload it and force it back into, basically force the pod to inject YAML into a pipeline. And so it's not an option in a high stakes environment.
Yeah,
so
no, that makes sense.
It's like I don't know, from like my old Skiff days, like the mirror method, right? Where it's like you can see the smoke, you can hear the canaries, but you can't actually like look into the eyes of the Medusa. And so like it's like building intelligent systems that can like give you the answers without giving you the answers. Is how you kind of deal with that in that kind of environment.
Is that like security issue? Obviously did you guys find that it's already filed in the upstream? Did you
it's already done. Like that's how, like when I did my security audits, when they were like when you're like, hey, can we use this tool? Yes, it has this security posture and like these are the known risks. How do we buy those down? Well, we just disable the UI and the risk is gone.
Got it. Right? Got it. Okay, so someone upstream knows. They're not finding out about it live by watching.
I read the report. No. I'm not like trying to like red hat the Tekton UI.
No, that's fair. As long as someone knows, right? Someone will fix it eventually.
Okay. That'll happen. But I think it was like a Vite or whatever they were using for the UI at the time had like a vulnerability.
This is what happens with JavaScript. That's all I'm saying. So Walid's question, I know you wanted to answer this one.
Oh yeah. So I think there was something about Flux over Argo CD. So first things first, I love them both. I use Argo CD a lot. But like as far as security posture, there is nothing more secure than being able to tell Kaivarno that it has to impersonate a service account, or excuse me, tell the job it has to impersonate a service account in order to like perform an action, which forces your developers to like be good, because they can't just like use the customized controller to like do anything that they want, right? And so when you're dealing in a world where you have multi-tenant architecture and you've got like all these different types of things running in the same cluster, you don't want to be in a situation where like a noisy neighbor realizes that they can like hijack a controller and like do something nefarious. And so you want to live in a world where even when Flux does something, you can enforce rules to like check for OCI compliance, check for the provenance of like where the container came from, check who signed the container, check all these things. And then like when it pops into the pod has like very restricted OIDC policies that only let it do that one thing that it's supposed to do in that namespace. So you end up in a world where like the joy of Argo CD is it's super user friendly. You can get in the UI, you can see everything, you can like redev in real time, which is great for development, but it's not the best when you're dealing with high stakes security. You need a system that can like be proven to handle multi-tenant in a way that's not going to cost you the ranch.
Yeah. And that service account thing, I think I file that under like the OpenShift opinions, right? We enforce those all over the place in OpenShift. It's like, oh, you want to do that? Go use a service account.
Yeah, or it's default.
Go set up that RBAC.
You don't know it's default.
Or yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's fun to see that, you know, our security opinions are, you know, they're not just ours. Sometimes they are just ours, it feels like, but that's obviously,
and it's something you really don't care about until you get wrecked. You know what I mean? And it's like one of the big things at Kraken was to be like security paranoid. And you just see it all the time. People get owned, and it's like, don't use password as your password for Postgres. Like, what are you doing? Like, come on, like, don't put yourself in that situation. And so that's kind of where I got my love for Flux. And before that, at the DoD, we used it for everything.
Yeah.
So do you think that working in the DoD has like, because I came from the DoD as well, and I know that like my view of the world is completely different than somebody that's never been in that world, right? So like I look to a totally different scope at things, and like 100%. The way I view problems and the way I troubleshoot, and like just the way I can put pieces together is because I'm used to taking like bespoke pieces and like, okay, and then here we go. Yeah. Do you think that that's helped you in this?
So yes and no, right? So like the reality of like the DoD environment is that like things move a lot slower and there's a lot more on your plate, right? So you're liable for a lot more risk. And in startup land, there's a lot less risk because you're trying to find product market fit. So they're like naturally opposites of each other. Right. But the superpower there, I think, is like coming from that world gives you an insight into like, okay, well, if I do it this way, then like I don't have to worry about us getting owned. And so like there's a lot of security trade-offs that I think are worth it. But like as far as like technical wise, like the industry is moving much faster than the DoD is just by nature, because they can afford to fail forward. Whereas in like dealing with the DoD, you don't have that luxury, right? You kind of have to get it right the first time, or like, so sorry, you know what I mean? And so like finding like moving from world to world was difficult. You know what I mean? Like startups move much faster than like, you know, your normal Scrum Agile workflow, which takes a while to get done. And that's the trade-off.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you said there that I'm completely on board with, right, is like you see the security problems, right? Like you're like, hey, if I do this, and that's gonna happen. You see tomorrow's problems versus
it's like you think differently.
Yeah.
You think differently when you've dealt with lives, right? Like when your software has touched lives, it's a lot different than like, oh man, my node release didn't deploy and my users have to wait 20 minutes for like their rebuild or whatever. You know what I mean? Where it's like when you do with spaceships or anything like that, it's like you don't really have the luxury to mess up, you know, because you're dealing with people's lives. So it's different stakes.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it was hard for me to make the transition initially coming from, because I grew up with the military. I mean, I was in the military and got out and then came over, and for a long time, like I had like that. I don't want to say tunnel vision, because I was trying to.
It's mission driven development is what I call it.
Very it's point and shoot, right? Like you're just like, all right.
Cannot relate. Thank goodness. Things I'm glad I don't have to have in my back pocket. But thank you, Johnny, for your service. I think that's what I'm obligated to say, right? No.
Not to me. I just did,
Johnny's like,
it was going to happen whether you think it or not. Yeah, I mean, like that's. Right. I was 17, so.
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I think it's different as well. Like, so you know, well, you're in a startup right now.
Yeah.
Johnny and I are in a company like where we're in the business of like our customers are those highly regulated finance environments and so forth that you were talking about. And so we're kind of in the middle, I think, of those two worlds where there are places where we get to iterate really quickly. And there are places where we absolutely cannot iterate quickly, even if we wanted to. And I think for me, like, I look at like the managed OpenShift offering, right? Because I'm a team lead on one of those offerings. Hello, why are you here? My German Shepherd just crashed the stream again, and you know how he is, Johnny, about the cat. It's going to be a whole problem because she's right at my feet.
Can't wait.
Can't wait. It's going to be loud. It's going to be terrible. Right. We have those. We have those kind of like, we have that dichotomy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have you know, a product that we make updates to roughly every 3 weeks, and then also a requirement to support it for like 24 months, right? And that is crazy. Like sitting down the middle of those two things, like how would you support this for 24 months? Like that longevity that you see a lot in hardware and not so much in the cloud, right? Is now it's coming to the cloud. And I was, you know, at the Kubernetes Contributor Summit at KubeCon North America, they actually talked about they're going to start doing like, you know, Kubernetes versions currently have something like a 12-month support cycle. They're going to add like certain versions will get like an additional 12-month support cycle.
Right.
So it's not just a Red Hat problem or an IBM problem or a Microsoft problem. Like this is the reality, is like everything is making a shift to the cloud, regardless of where it sits in those terms of those posturings. And so we're going to start seeing, I think, some really interesting things, because I've seen personally with some things in the cloud that if, you know, ended up sticking around for 2 years without being turned off and on again, and cloud native workloads are expected to be restarted. So very interesting things start happening when they're never restarted. And so, yeah, he went away. Thank goodness. That's going to be fun to see. I'm personally invested in how this story for the industry develops.
Yeah, it's you know, a tale as old as time, where, you know, I remember when I was getting into the industry, everyone was trying to like get into the cloud, and then everybody pivoted back to hardware. And now we're in this weird like hybrid world where like some people want to be on-prem, some people want to be on the cloud. And for some things it makes sense. Like, you know, it just makes sense to have your own rack for sensitive stuff, right? Yeah. But like, I think, as my buddy always says, like Kubernetes is becoming like the Linux OS for like the cloud. And that kind of like makes it agnostic, plus or minus, like Linkerd and like ESXi custom configs to do routing and stuff like that. Pretty much the same everywhere, plus or minus a KubeVirt installer too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's funny, right? Like the whole thing has shifted. So like I'm old, so like we started out with bare metal, you know, like single service bare metal nodes. So I had you know, this awesome big beefy machine for a domain controller, which was useless. You know, and then we got into virtualization, and so then we started like virtualizing workloads, and then dealing with all the chaos that came with that, like, and getting people that had been traditionally building servers to build in VMs with, all right, dude, you don't need 800 gigaflops of whatever for your stupid little bitty database, right? For your your SQLite database. Like, it's just ridiculous. Let's actually do this correctly. And then we went to containers, and then Kubernetes, and now we're starting to work back a little bit. Right. But it's still under the same umbrella as Kubernetes, like with KubeVirt and all that, you know, where it's like, okay, we're getting there. And I think, I'm wondering if we're going to hit like not a plateau, but like just we're going to level off for a little bit, and then something cool is just going to come out, and it's just going to be insane. And then start all over.
I just think they're all going to be the same. Like, we're going to get our own service mesh of some variety, and you know, people are never going to be the wiser.
Yeah, it's going to. I think that's exactly it. There's going to be some like what do you call it? The homogenization in such a way that it creates like a from the end user, that abstraction. So one of the things we had the IBM Z Systems people on from their Ansible team a while ago. My husband just came down to retrieve the dog. I wish you all could see this. The dog is like, oh, I'm sorry. I know I'm in the wrong spot. My husband's sitting there looking at the dog like this, like, what are you doing? I'm sorry that is all off camera. I'm enjoying it immensely though. My dog is old and he knows better. And my husband's it's one of those things when your dog is at a certain age, like all of that communication can happen with body language. And it's just like, you're having a whole conversation. It's like any best friend, right? I'm going to just talk to you with like an eyebrow raise and you know what I'm thinking. Anyway, but back to the whole thing, right? So one of the things that we're seeing is I think is really cool, and these folks talked about it, is like the mainframe hybrid cloud architecture with containerization. And of course, because it's IBM, strategically for that is OpenShift. So you can run OpenShift on your mainframe, and you can run your mainframe apps on your OpenShift in the cloud and on the mainframe, and like that whole thing. And when you think about how much of our lives actually run through mainframes, and you're never even aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't dealt with like that since like IBM Power out of Kelly Space Center.
Mainframes grow a lot. That mainframes are not going anywhere. I always get excited when we talk about mainframes because somebody told me once that a mainframe uses less electricity than my refrigerator, and I was like, that is so cool. And awesome. I like hardware. I can't get over that fact. That one will stay with me forever. Our Hope 9 said, "Is this the point in time to talk to Hillary about the garbage collection function that was designed around your cluster being updated every other week?" Oh, can we not talk about this actually? Oh man, let's pretend we didn't talk about. Let's pretend. I'm gonna pretend I didn't see this. Actually, we're not talking about it. We could talk about it later.
Let's start with no and stay there.
Yeah, not unless you want to come on as a guest of the episode and talk about it yourself. That's where I'm going to leave that one.
But knowing our Hope 9, he's probably down. He's probably
I would be excited. Yeah. I would be excited. If you actually legitimately want to come on the show, our Hope 9, please do. That would be awesome. We need more customers to actually come on the show. No offense, Walt. You've been great, but you're not a customer. So
it's all good.
All right, where are we? We are 3 minutes to the top of the hour. I do have a hard stop today. Personally, I don't think that this topic is I think we time boxed it very nicely. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. Did you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just a note, if you're ever like looking through your Tekton stuff and you're finding yourself needing some assistance, hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter, whatever's easiest for you. Happy to, I'm sure I've fallen on that sword before. Would love to save you a little bit of time. Quick message there. And thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for putting your hand up. Again, strangers on the internet coming and teaching me the things I've always wanted to learn is like the best part about this job. The other best part about this job is Johnny.
Oh, that's nice.
Johnny's pretty great.
I appreciate that. That's nice. Thank you.
And that's because Johnny does all the things I don't want to do. Okay, I don't know. I think that's it. I can't remember any announcements I forgot to give. I can't remember anything else. In 2 weeks, we're going to come back and we have oh dear, I'm the worst at this. The topic in 2 weeks is interesting because it was somebody who also reached out on this game development topic. And he took classic video games and threw them onto some containers for people to enjoy. And I was like, that is so cool. Let's please talk about that. So he's going to tell us a little bit more about that. His name is Blaze Stewart. So yeah, in 2 weeks, that'll be the topic. If you like classic video games, if you like taking things and moving them to the cloud for funsies, I think that's going to be a great episode. I have no idea what tool sets he used to do it either. So it's all going to be a surprise to me. Nice. And that's what I look forward to in 2 weeks. Until then, I didn't say it at all this episode. I usually say it like 5 or 6 times. So this is going to be the first time I say it this episode. Until then, choose your technical debt wisely. Walt, thank you for going over perfect examples of well-chosen technical debt. Friends, we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.